Let me begin by emphasizing that I lead a straightforward, no-nonsense lifestyle. I don't drink heavily or dabble in anything that could cloud my judgment. That's exactly why I can say with complete certainty that what unfolded last New Year's Eve wasn't some trick of the mind or product of intoxication. It was undeniably real. I live on the outskirts of a quiet, unremarkable Midwestern town. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, and life hums along at a peaceful, predictable pace. A handful of my close friends reside even farther out, tucked away in the rural expanse beyond town limits. Reaching their homes means navigating long, winding country roads that snake through dense forests and open fields, far removed from streetlights or traffic signals. These roads take on an eerie quality after dark, stretching endlessly under the cover of trees that loom like silent sentinels on either side. One of my closest friends, Chris, lives with his family in a secluded upscale neighborhood nestled deep within the woods. Their house is part of a small but affluent development, isolated from town by miles of unpaved back roads. Each year, without fail, Chris's family hosts a lavish New Year's Eve party, extending invitations to all their friends and neighbors, myself included. It's a night I look forward to, and the arrival of their formal invitation in the mail always sparks a sense of excitement. That year, winter had been mild, with little more than chilly breezes hinting at the season. But just a few days before New Year's Eve, the temperature plummeted, and the landscape was swallowed by an unrelenting cold. The drive to Chris's house felt harsher than usual, the frostbitten air seeping through the cracks in the car as I rattled down the uneven, unmaintained roads. Potholes and frost heaves turned the journey into a bumpy ordeal, and with darkness falling fast, I found myself gripping the wheel tighter than normal. Typically, I avoid driving with my high beams on. I hate how blinding they are for oncoming drivers, and the sudden glare of someone else's brights has irritated me more times than I can count. But on that night, with the forest pressing in and no sign of another car in sight, I had no choice but to flick them on. The inky blackness that stretched ahead of me felt impenetrable without them. Even with the beams slicing through the night, the shadows seemed to deepen, and the road's sharp twists and turns caught me by surprise more than once. As I made my way down the familiar route, I passed the only other building along that stretch of road, a small, ramshackle cabin set back just beyond the tree line. From the outside it looked abandoned, the roof sagging and the windows coated in grime. Yet strangely, on several occasions when I'd driven by in the past, I had caught glimpses of faint lights flickering inside. The sight always unsettled me, but I brushed it off as the work of squatters or hunters seeking shelter from the cold. That night, as I passed by the cabin, I instinctively glanced in its direction. Sure enough, a faint orange glow emanated from within, flickering like candlelight. I told myself not to think much of it and continued driving. After all, Chris's house wasn't much farther, and the warmth of the party awaited me. Little did I know that brief glimpse at the cabin would stick with me long after the night's festivities had ended. As I cruised down an isolated stretch of road, my headlights swept across something that immediately struck me as out of place. A pale figure standing stiffly between the trees at the forest's edge. At first glance, I thought it might have been a trick of the light, a misplaced road marker, or even an oddly shaped branch. But as the distance between us closed, it became unmistakably clear. There, barely illuminated by the beams, stood a woman. She didn't move, standing perfectly still in a thin, flowing white dress that clung to her frame in the freezing air. The sheer impracticality of her attire for such brutal winter conditions unsettled me, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. She remained positioned with her back to the trees, her feet just shy of the pavement's edge. I left my high beams on, hoping to get a clearer view, but the intense light seemed to obscure her features, bouncing sharply off the pale fabric and masking any details of her face. I strained to make out more but couldn't. My thoughts raced, but oddly enough my primary reaction was relief. Grateful she hadn't stepped forward or stumbled into the path of my car, forcing me into an unexpected stop. As I drove past her, my grip on the wheel relaxed slightly, but curiosity got the better of me. A quick glance into the rearview mirror shattered any fleeting sense of comfort. Her silhouette remained stark against the dark backdrop of the woods, outlined faintly by the soft red glow of my taillights. She had turned. Now, she faced the road, her gaze following my car, though she didn't appear to have taken a single step forward. A sharp chill rippled through me, tightening my stomach into knots. Eventually, I arrived at Chris's house without further incident, shaking off the lingering unease. The party unfolded like every other year. Laughter, drinks, the countdown to midnight, and the celebratory cheer that followed. Hours passed, and when the last guests filtered out, I lingered to help clean up, chatting with Chris's family as we collected empty glasses and discarded party hats. By the time I stepped outside, my car stood alone in the driveway, the once packed lot now completely deserted. Sliding into the driver's seat, I turned the ignition, ready to head home and put the strange encounter behind me. That's when the dashboard flickered to life, and a warning light glowed faintly. A low tire pressure alert. I frowned, dismissing it as a consequence of the freezing temperatures. The car was old, and winter had a habit of triggering all sorts of random malfunctions. It wasn't the first time this had happened, and I was willing to bet it wouldn't be the last. Still, as I sat there, the image of the woman lingered in the corners of my mind. For a fleeting moment I considered staying, maybe even calling Chris to let him know what I'd seen, but logic prevailed, and I convinced myself it was nothing, just a strange passing moment best left unexplored. Not long into the return drive, however, the discomfort returned. Something felt off, a quiet sense of wrongness that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't long before the source made itself clear. The car jolted violently, groaning beneath me, and within seconds, the unmistakable screech of metal grinding against asphalt pierced the night air. I swore under my breath, steering toward the shoulder and easing the car to a stop. With the engine idling, I exhaled sharply, muttering curses as I prepared to step out and assess the damage. Despite every instinct screaming at me to stay in the car, curiosity, or perhaps something darker, compelled me to step out. The night air bit into my skin as I flicked on my phone's flashlight, its narrow beam slicing through the shadows. Each step away from the car felt heavier than the last, but I pressed forward, crouching beside the front tire to assess the damage. My pulse pounded louder with each passing second, echoing in the oppressive silence around me. I ran the light along the edges of the tires, hoping for nothing more than a sharp piece of glass or a stray nail, but the sight that greeted me turned my stomach. All 4 tires were mangled, ripped apart by long, jagged tears that resembled claw marks. The cuts were deep, as though something had raked across them with a force no ordinary animal could muster. I swallowed hard, unable to reconcile the damage with anything rational. As I stood, backing away from the car, the woods fell unnaturally quiet. I hadn't noticed the ambient noise until it vanished. No wind, no chirping crickets, no rustling leaves. The stillness settled over me like a suffocating blanket, thick with unseen weight. Every hair on my body stood on end. The snap of a twig pierced the silence. My breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I extinguished the flashlight and let the darkness engulf me. I strained to listen, muscles tensed and ready to bolt. Another step. The sound was closer this time. Then, cutting through the void, a soft, almost melodic voice drifted from the tree line. "I see you." The words floated gently, but their very presence twisted into something sinister, chilling me deeper than the winter air ever could. My feet felt glued to the ground. I held my breath, hoping, praying, that if I remained still, whatever was out there might lose interest and retreat. But the stillness lingered, unbroken. "Can you see me?" The voice came again, this time laced with a strange sweetness that felt horribly out of place. My entire body trembled. I forced myself to move, flicking the light back on and directing the beam toward the source of the voice. She was there, the woman in white. Only this time she was closer, standing just beyond the edge of the road. Her once flowing dress was now caked in mud and torn in places, dragging across the frozen ground. The pale glow of the flashlight revealed more than I ever wanted to see. Her face was twisted and gaunt, eyes sunken into dark hollows that seemed to swallow the faint light. Her lips were cracked, and beneath them stretched a grin that didn't belong to anything human. I didn't think. I ran. The sound of snapping branches exploded behind me, confirming that she was following, no, chasing me. I pumped my legs harder, barely registering the rough terrain underfoot. My only goal was distance. Somehow, in the chaos of it all, I made it back to Chris's house. My fists pounded desperately on the door until it swung open, revealing Chris's startled mother. I all but fell inside, gasping out fragmented words between breaths as I recounted everything I had seen. They believed me, or at least they pretended to. Chris's father called the police, and they let me stay the night in the guest room. But as I lay there beneath the blankets long after everyone else had drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. At exactly 3:14 a.m., a faint tapping rattled the window beside the bed. I froze. The soft, unmistakable voice drifted from the darkness outside. "I see you." I clenched the blanket tighter, heart pounding so violently that I thought it might betray my hiding spot. I refused to look. Every part of me screamed to stay still, to never acknowledge whatever stood beyond that window. The tapping persisted, relentless and patient, but I remained curled beneath the covers, silently pleading for morning to arrive. When the first rays of sunlight finally crept through the curtains, I mustered the courage to look. Outside, faint scratches adorned the glass, jagged and deep. A rusted knife lay on the ground beneath the window, half buried in the frost. The police searched the area but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. They dismissed my story as exhaustion or an elaborate prank. But not far from Chris's house near the old abandoned cabin, they found something else. Scattered in the snow were the remains of several animals, their bodies gutted and strewn across the clearing like discarded toys. I still don't know who or what she was. But next New Year's Eve, I'm not driving alone. I'll take the long way home, carpool with friends, or maybe even skip the party altogether. Some roads aren't meant to be traveled at night, and some voices are better left unheard. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, make sure to leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced something strange on a deserted road? I'd love to hear your stories. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel for more eerie encounters and terrifying true stories. There's plenty more where this came from, if you dare.